Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this session with our guest, architect Secundino Fernández, whom many of you know from the sessions we had 2 years ago. It seems like it was yesterday on the film about El Vedado. He will talk to us about this century-old project, the Havana subway. I am Ana Maria Hernandez of the Bildner Center and La Guardia Community College, and I would like to thank Mauricio Font, the director of the Bildner Center, Elba Barcelato, and Rosalina Lopez for making this session possible. Secundino Fernández is an award-winning architect, interior designer, and urban planner who was professor of architectural design at City College and Pratt Institute. He has won numerous awards and citations, including the first prize and contract for the Maryland World War II Memorial in Annapolis. Before establishing his own practice, he was chief designer and planning coordinator for Gruen Associates with responsibilities in major international projects. Please be aware that this session is being recorded and your attendance indicates that you agree with being recorded. The recording will be placed in the Bildner YouTube channel and we will let you know once it's available. So there will be a question and answer session at the end of architect Fernandez's presentation, and please use the Q&A instead of the chat for your questions. And please, without further delay, let us welcome Secundino Fernández.
Thank you all. Welcome. We're going to be seeing a history of these attempts at transit in the city of Havana, actually from a very important standpoint. And let me make sure that this works. You know, one of the saddest things for me personally is that the pressure has been off in the development of rapid transit systems in Havana. Some failed attempts for various reasons. And now the cities of Santo Domingo and San Juan actually are catching up to Havana, both in size and population. But worse yet, both of those cities already have a rapid transit system. Santo Domingo is already starting on their third line. To me, it's a special place. And what we would like to see is that it joins that group of over 200 cities that have in the world rapid transit systems, many of them brand new. Yet, a very important item, historical item, is that Spain considered Havana of such importance in Cuba in general that in 1834, the Queen of Spain approved the building of the first railroad line. A railroad line almost 30 miles long, 30 kilometers long, went from Havana to Bejucal, is still functioning, okay? And this was the third country in the world to have steam railway. Great Britain opened in 1825 and the US in 1830. So shortly thereafter, Cuba had joined the ranks, number 3. And here is Bejucal as it is today, you know, with one of the old relics. One of the important things about Havana, somewhat different from other cities, is that they have what they call calzadas, roadways, causeways, that in fact are arcaded streets of the first order, not necessarily wide, but of importance bigger than anything else because the city, especially the old part, has very narrow streets. These calzadas are instrumental in the development and growth of the city, as we will see. Here we see the first railway station, Villanueva, with the already part of the line in red that went to Bejucal. And very quickly, in 1857, we begin to charter a horse-drawn tram in the city. First, it served the docks. It was later deleted because of traffic. But the first official passenger line was El Carmelo, a place of entertainment that developed at the west end of Havana, as you can see there. That was built in 1858, okay? Now, Havana was late in that, in the development of transit trams only after Mexico City. By 1862, we see already a growing network of trams and also the growth of additional rail lines. The one to the lower left-hand corner is the new railway to Marianao, as well as the one in the lower right center on the bay. This was where rail began to ship from the United States to Cuba entire railway carts loaded that would get filled with sugar and sent back to the United States. This is a photo simply of how the city was wise enough to do the actual construction of the railways way ahead of the actual urban growth. Here we see it's almost at the outskirts. And here there's a line being built. Another view, this one from 1859, showing San Lázaro Street. As you can see, the Malecón on the left was not yet built, and the coral reef shows to be only about 3 feet above sea level. Obviously, it was later filled because now it's about 10 feet above sea level. And you see the trams from San Lázaro, also from Velascoen, making a turn onto San Lázaro. This was the rail line that went on to El Carmelo. Here is the same line further west, already on the area near Infanta. In fact, if you can see the rocky outcrop on the left, that's the old battery of Santa Clara that later became the site for the National Hotel. Here is that line of Linea many years later in this photo, of course, all the way to El Carmelo. It had a wide divider, and some of us rode on it. By the 1920s, the network of trams in blue was incredibly dense, serving the city to the point where all those areas already built were within walking distance of a tram line. In those days, the trams used to stop every block. Okay, later that was changed to every 2 blocks. When the buses took over later, that was the case, to every 2 blocks, a stop. By the 1930s, this is a major transit development in the city, as you can see, and both the lines in blue of the trams as well as the railways. One very important date in the actual growth of transit in Havana was in 1921. A project under Menocal was studied and drawn up and approved to have a subway system in the city of Havana. This was the actual drawing. I doctored it up only so that you could see it better. Okay, showing 3 lines. That was a very ambitious project that would have served the city extremely well. In part, I think that they were looking not only toward New York, but also toward Madrid, because Madrid was only slightly smaller than the city. Havana was only slightly smaller than the city of Madrid and already had a subway since 1919. So why not have one in Havana in 1921? Unfortunately, by the time that the 40s arrived, the city had a problem. And that was that Havana had not 2, but 4 rush hours, for those of you who can remember. Everybody went home to lunch at 12:30 and returned to work at 3:30. So you had a doubled up of transit potential and obligation. And what did it create? This was a traffic jam that began to seal the fate of the tram cars themselves. Not only here, the same thing happened in New York, okay? And in many other cities. The problem was that unless they had developed underground a transit system like New York did, these trams were meant to disappear. And they did, little by little. By 1952, major construction began to take place, and the city was beginning to excavate to remove all these lines. Many of these streets had to be, in fact, all redone. By 1954, I believe, the entire city was completed. These are some of the photographs of that era. And it was a major disruption in Havana. At the end, everybody seemed to appreciate the near completion of all that work. It really only took 2 years to do. Soon, the GM buses began to land in Havana. The good thing about this was that they understood the difficulty of those rush hours. So the number of buses here were increased a lot in order to be able to handle it. And no longer it became very fashionable to see a lot of people hanging out of the doorways of the tram lines and the old buses. Here is a picture of Infanta, already repaved, brand new. And 23rd Street as well. Finally, Linea, totally changed with a much narrower divider, a green divider, and with 2 additional traffic lines. Then this I just came upon today, and in fact, it was published. Where was it published? In the LA Times, which I did not read, and that was a planned subway. Now, I see in other places where later on they say, no, the work already started in the 70s. But here we have the first stage of a $900 million Soviet-designed subway, which I beg to differ. It was really designed by Cubans. And in fact, that great team that worked so hard for more than a decade is part of this presentation. But what I did see was this particular sketch. And where did I see it? I saw it in the internet. It grabbed my attention. And it was a scheme that seemed a little different from anything that I had seen before. Certainly nothing like that one in 1921. And I didn't know who did it. But I was later able to find out who did do it. In fact, a gentleman by the name of Jose Regosa was kind enough to publish this. This was their scheme in a color sketch of his, including a line very, very well extended to the east, to the right, along the entire shore of all the beaches in Havana. One of the things that, to me, was strange was that I was seeing hand-drawn sketches. Why didn't I see anything more professional, more complete? Having had that, and having written 4 articles describing the entire system, I did this drawing in a somewhat more readable, official look of the 3 lines that then were proposed. Unfortunately, this project was canceled. I don't know exactly when, but I think it was in 1990 or so. There were reasons given, and the main reason given was the fall of the Soviet Union, no longer having the fund there available, funding for this project. But here I am showing that system superimposed on the little thin black lines of the existing railway system, which I consider to be a very important thing because Havana had an extensive urban railway system good enough to convert to a interurban line, okay, much like New York has with Long Island Railroad and New Jersey Transit and even Metro North. I did see these bits and pieces of information published. This was one very dramatic photograph, rendering. Here, another little bit of piece. Again, notice the smallestness of the publications being done here. I mean, I would think that this would be something to brag about and to publish, you know, very amply, and it wasn't. Even this section. Yeah, it's true enough, believable. And here we see for the first time the name of the engineer was being credited then, Fernando Perez Monteagudo, who was the director of this executive group of the Metro of the city of Havana. This was published in Ghana. I was able to acquire this photograph of one of the entrances of the already drilled tunnel. This is the exit across from Copelia on J Street between 23rd and 25th. It's not clear how it is or where it is, but I trust that it's somewhere there. This is the actual tunnel that was drilled. I don't know how it was done. It doesn't seem like it was bored with boring machines like we have today. It seems more like it was, almost hand chiseled, with these contraptions that actually just pull away the debris. Here is another view of that same 23rd Street layout, where you have another tunnel seemingly going off to the left. And another view. Now, how long is it? It's approximately 3 kilometers, short, just shy of 3 kilometers. And why stop here? Why not at least have a little line that extended up to Copelia? Because Copelia, at the crossing of L and 23rd Street, is probably the most used corner of Havana, the most congregated, filled with people, especially at night. As Jose described it to me, they actually drilled the entire tunnel directly from that entrance at the other end, on the west end, near 22nd Street. I'm calling it the 22nd Street station, and going way under the cemetery. Now, why so deep? Part of the problem was that they were looking at having a system that actually was or could be used against air attack. Well, if that is done, then the prices go up. The costs go up significantly because of the additional excavation required, because of the additional vertical transportation required to take people up and down. Okay. They were kind enough also to publish, and the whole thing is available on Facebook if you want to go and see it, on their Metro de La Habana, drawings that were done by their team. Here is a cutaway, and you see right smack in the middle of it, the underground metro, right along the center of Avenida de Rancho Boyeros. This is just next to the Plaza de la Revolucion, and their building, their office building, is the one here in the foreground. Here is another cutaway drawing, okay, showing the line of Neptuno going and turning into L, right at the turn of San Lázaro and L in front of the university. Very elaborate drawings, frankly, okay? But as you can see, you can tell how deep these tunnels were. Here is an elevator station in Marianao, where the system was taken above ground. Again, a very elaborate drawing, perhaps a little heavy-handed, of the system. I think that it was certainly considered to be a heavy system. But what do we mean by that? A heavy system, New York has a heavy system. It's big trains with great capacities, as opposed to middle or even light systems. Light systems, of those of you who may know the Boston T, that's more of a light system in a middle system. It has some lines that are in the middle and some lines that are light. Light because they're basically trams. They go above ground on the outskirts of the city and then go underground as they near the center. I had to honor this hardworking team. This is one of their pictures. I can imagine the disappointment. And then I had the opportunity that the Center for Cuban Studies enabled me to go to Havana, return after 32 years. And I went to this pavilion, and it was magnificent to see the model that it houses, that I, since then, have made sure that I take everyone to see it. One of the things that I had with me was one of my old hobbies. I had already started in 1984 with my little old Mac computer, the tiny ones, the 512s, a rendering showing it being an isometric of the city of Havana. This was actually a recreation of a model that I had built here in New York at the age of 14 of that same area on a piece of plywood that measured about 2 by 4 feet. And this was my play tool. This is where I spent a lot of nights just putting and adding little buildings, and then came upon luminous paint and had the fun of just painting them with that luminous paint and turning the lights off in the bedroom to see everything light up. I showed this to everyone at the GTIC, Mario Coruchula, Gina Rey, Isabel Rigol, Mario González Cedeño, and they were enchanted. You could take their model in a little drawing, in a little postcard. I said, well, maybe you guys can put it here and sell it. So I had also taken, and I had done this on my own, a drawing of the expansion of the city in color, and decided to take a print of it. Well, they were very impressed. It's hanging in the main conference room of the GDIC. The new director that took over after Mario and Gina moved on was a fellow by the name of Julio Reyes Villafuera. This is a card-carrying member, sharp engineer who wanted to make improvements to the facility and do everything possible to make it better. And usually to create, in fact, a think tank out of the GDIC. One of the things that I came later to realize is he already had known that the Metro, and I didn't know, that the Metro project had been canceled. Sorry, and I don't know why this is happening. Let me go back. I hit something. There you go. Here is Julio with Gina Rey. I guess he already knew that the main project of the 1980s had been canceled and put on hold. It was never published. They actually created a book out of all the drawings, and it became a classified document. It has not been revealed, and none of the members of the team have been able to do more than to help me with what you have seen here so far, to show me the work they did. But Julio asked, I said, would you be willing to come back and lecture the planning workshops here in the city? I said, sure. You know, and thanks to Sandra Levinson, it all happened. So in 1996 and also in 1998, I went back with a whole bunch of drawings, all plotted to show the city. And see, some of these are what the planning thought behind it. This was one of the drawings that showed all the existing rail lines that could be expanded, improved, renovated, and create an interurban transit systems for the city that serves primarily the outlying areas, but that gets you to the middle of the city as well, okay? Or close enough. Then if you add to that, little by little, the additional internal lines most of them underground. You can create a network of both a metro system with an interurban line system. It was proposed in those two events, and lo and behold, I find out that they were respected, as you will see. One of the things that I had warned them about was that with the help of Google aerials, I was seeing that the line to Bauta, that's shown here, was being removed. I had heard that plans were for it to be another autopista. And one of the things I said to them, I remove it, you know? If anything, it should be refurbished. Well, they did refurbish it, and years later, it turned out it was the most convenient line possible to access the Mariel container cargo port. So, you know, I'm a believer of saving the infrastructure we have, improving it, and making it work better for us today. And here it is. A little extension was shown going to the Mariel area. As you can see there, I happen to have a photograph of it. Here it is. You can see the old line going straight to the left, but you can see the railway spin-off going off to the right to Mariel, okay? So this line was saved, and it doubled. Came 2002. I hadn't seen much happening, and I was a little disappointed. But they had this great architectural biennale happening in Havana in 2002, and I decided I was going to participate. I took with me this particular drawing of my vision for the city for the 21st century, and it included two ideas. Not to scare people, I used the word metro ligero, light system, but I also added tourist trams, because I felt that the combination of the two would do a lot for tourism in the city, as well as for the people there. There's nothing more important than a good and growing transportation system for cities, for them to grow, to develop, to improve, okay? And it's very clear. We suffered in New York by not having this growth and improvement, and every excuse was given for not doing so, cost being one of them. But as it turns out, and this was the actual picture that I took of it being shown there, and all of us discussing it over dinner between Julio and Mario and Hina, and even good old friends like those who passed, Roberto Segre and Gotardi, my friend Monty, and Sarah Herda, who's now the director of the Grand Foundation. This happened in July of 2013. A scheme that seemed very, very familiar. Lines actually quite different from the metro plans that were done in the 1980s. And the curious thing that I saw was that logo, because that logo seemed very familiar to me. That whole Metrobus system was developed to have 17 lines, okay, with stops far apart, much like a subway system, okay, in order to be able to cover the city with fewer stops that also help in making it faster. I decided to take that same drawing and redo it, showing how the lines work when you add them to the existing street network. And what happens is, if you notice, right smack in the middle, that vertical line, heavy line, happens to be the not so wide Calzada of Jesus del Monte. And the problem with that is that when you had all those different lines of metro buses smacking one not so wide Calzada, that is going to suffer. It's going to slow down the system. It's not going to provide what you want. Strangely enough, it was very, very extensive. As you can see, the system was also going way further. And why? For example, the line going off to the lower right hand, there's a rail line there existing. Why add a metro bus to go that far? Why not stop it before and use a renovated rail line to take you the rest of the way? These were the new buses that came into existing at that time. They called the system P lines, by the way. So it was P1 through P17. Then I also saw in 2015 the creation of the urban interurban line system I had been talking about for quite so many years already. And it did show the existing stops only, with only a few additional ones, shy of what I had proposed, because I really wanted it to be much more serving and comprehensive. But nonetheless, it was there. Now, this came from Wikipedia, and I will just say I'll trust it for as far as I can see. But line 2, for example, it says it's not operational as of 2021. And the same thing goes for line number 3. Some of them are in very bad repair and need complete overhaul. I found this picture and I laughed because I had never known that, in fact, we did have a subway tunnel in Havana. This was the extension of the Marianao Linea that went to the Mercado on Carlos III Avenue, that actually connected to the line of Zanja, the old line that used to take you to Bejucal. It's still there, by the way. Other lines that are more in use are like this one. This one, I believe, is the somewhat improved line to Bejucal with new railway stock. One very important thing was that the Hershey system, Hershey line, was improved because they bought from Barcelona some of the old refurbished railway stock. And that served for as long as they remained open. I believe it was closed last year. This is the Ciénaga station, as it is today. This is the not so good condition Luyano station, although here now we have double lines already. This is the line that goes today from Tulipan to the airport. The schedule is loose enough that they have only a single line. This should be obviously improved, renovated, and doubled, okay? And additional stations created. But this is a tremendous help to have already from Tulipan to the airport, okay? And this is what made me think of what improvements can we make little by little that are palatable and are, you know, going back on February 2015 with very, very close friends and with the leadership of Sandra and the help of the Center for Cuban Studies, I came back to the old place to see the model and met this young lady. Turns out this young lady, who's now the director, Lisa was in my classes in 1996. Lisa told me, yeah, we used your plans. We created the Metro bus. Well, we have an urgency here, folks, and that is we have to see everything we can do to help to make the city better. I had also the opportunity of meeting with Juan Antonio Bueno, the former dean of the School of Architecture at FIU, because Nicolas Quintana, a good old friend, had urged me to work and be part of their team and maybe to write their last chapter on transportation. So this is a new thought of mine, to try to push one idea and create maybe something like this. And it can start very simple. These are the existing lines today, okay, with the existing stations. By adding a 2.5 kilometer underground line, we can carry the rail line that takes you from Tulipan to the airport onto a station I call Centro Rampa, which is Copelia location, with a new hotel going up, L and 23rd Street. We can go to another, once we do that, a secondary improvement, additional lines to go to these airline, to the central railway terminal, and it can be done either through Sangha or through Manglar. Sangha is preferable because it's smack in the middle of Central Havana. And by the time you do that, you're beginning to have a metro system in Havana itself, in the center of the city. That's only 3.5 kilometers. Once you've proven that this is really rebuilding the city, then you go on. You can go to the blue line and only do a portion, say from Central Rampa around all the way down to Agua Dulce. Now you're saturating the city with rail service. Finally, a second line, the red line, and so forth. I'm not going to belabor this, and then the yellow line as the third line. By that time, you have reached a maximum, optimum layout of underground rail serving the entire central Havana, all Havana, and the Vedado, okay? Which is the vast majority of the population of the city. One tool that we use in transportation planning is to create the 1 kilometer circle. It tells you that anything within that circle is within walking distance of a station. And as you can see from this optimal solution of 3 lines, you've already covered the entire central part of the city. A detail of that is shown here, of how it can do with stations already drawn in and the interconnection and the interchange. This particular scheme, though, shows the line not through Sangha, but through, or Manglar, but in between. One reason for this is that the Manglar line at Cuatro Caminos has a problem of flooding. If you look on the upper left, you see the red line zigzagging to avoid going to an area that may be subject to flooding. When the tram line on Linea was created, they were smart enough to do it at the contour of 5 meters above sea level, which means, you know, they were roughly around 16, 17 feet above sea level, away from any dangerous flooding that would take place summarily almost every year in the city. A second idea that I had, and this is in discussion also with the people at the CDIG, with Lisa, in fact, is that, you know, maybe we consider a hybrid system, something a little bit more like the Boston T, where you have both a combination of a heavy or metro system combined with a tram line system that can go above ground. And in so doing, 1, it is cheaper. 2, you're able to put many more lines and provide even better service. And then this is what happens when you go from the underground to above ground. Here's a sketch of what 23rd Street line is. It's already there, okay? It's much steeper than I'm showing in this sketch, but it's already there. Why not use it? Here is a detail of that Metron smaller, reduced station underground, okay, where each one has 2 cars. This is I borrowed this one from someone who had a very nice scheme of an elevated one. This is a rendering cut section of through the Central Park Station as an idea of what it could be. And so we can create a new system in the city. One very good thing that they've done over there, okay, is, and this has been recently published, is a new urban intermodal station at Fontanar. And it already shows, if you notice, that same line, Tulipan to the airport, with double lines, okay? And funny enough, with a nice little single car running along it. And here you have bus stations all combined. And this can service Fontanar, the Kuhai. So I hope that they're joining forces everywhere to make things work better. This is what a very simple system of the two lines underground can be. When I was very young, I went to Milan, and they were beginning to construct through cut and fill a very simple system, very inexpensive in comparison in that city for the subway. It has grown tremendously since. And this is the idea. Just cut the ditch and put in the structure. Okay, in this case, actually, there's 3 lines. So you're talking about doing even less, where the major cost is actually the stations. More recently, they have these incredible boring machines that create tunnels, circular tunnels, okay? And in fact, the Spanish Dragados de España, who just completed the tunnels for the interconnection between Amtrak and Metro Line and here under Madison Avenue, the tunnels are built. The bureaucracy, however, kind of slows it down. But they use these contraptions to do a very incredible job very quickly. This is the result of those. In Madrid, this is, I'm dreaming, of course. I'm seeing this as that Centro Rampa station where 3 stations connect, 3 terminals connect. And you can see the incredible things that are happening elsewhere. I'm watching my clock. And they published this little drawing about the future of the metros and what they can do going forward, which I thought was very important. Here is a very simple relative cost comparison. And as you can see, there's huge ranges. You can make things as cheap as you want or as expensive as you want. And certainly Madrid now is going all hog and making the most expensive system in the world, short of what China is now doing, that is even just blasting the world of rapid transit. I hope to see this vision come to reality. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dino, for your excellent and exciting presentation. It gets better every time that I see it with the details. So now we move to the question and answer. We habitually at the Bildner take 3 questions at a time, and we already have 3. So I am please asking you, because I cannot see all of you at the same time. So instead of raising your hand, please write your question in the chat. And we have 3 questions already. One from Hugo Fernandez. He's asking why Bejucal, why the best? So I'll give you the 3 questions, Dino, and then you can take them. Why Bejucal? The second is from Andrew. Would the New Jersey path be considered light rail? And the third is a very long question from Miriam and Sarah, that apparently the terrain underground, apparently there is a rumor that the terrain underground was not stable enough for an underground system, that it was something that had to do with the water table. And the question is, what is required to be able to build underground? Why would Havana be different from Manhattan or Boston? Could you speak to that? Also considering the flooding problems that we have had in New York recently because of hurricane, etc. So there are the 3. So I urge you please to pose other questions in the chat.
All right, I'll start with Bejucal first.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it was such a long time ago, very little was published. But one of the things that I do know, and some of my closest friends know, is that Bejucal was a center of, as I found out, of textile production, together with Arihuanabo. Why? I don't know. But some of the most world-famous linens come from the center of the old province of Havana. And I suspect that Bejucal was one of them. In fact, in 2015, we did take a trip because one of the people in my group, Joan Lahoen, her parents owned a textile manufacturing place in Bejucal. So I think that may have been one reason. It's also a nearby city. It also goes past Santiago de Las Vegas and takes the entire line along the present Rancho Boyeros. And that became always a very, very strong line for rail. Aside from that, part of the interest of why would the Queen want this, okay? There's a good reason to say that sugarcane production was also important, okay? So I have to put all that on the table. Now, the second question was on the past. Yes, the past could be considered a lighter system. It's not, it's heavy in New York, and then it goes above ground outside in Jersey. It's still a heavy system, okay? But it unifies to New Jersey Transit, which is a light system. It's really a little more than trams, okay? Or elongated trains, but still, it's all about, most of it above ground. And finally, the question from my dear Mary is that, no, Mary, unfortunately, I have heard a lot of excuses, not only in Havana, but almost everywhere as to why we don't do this or why don't do that. And the example I always say about flooding is, folks, then what do you tell the people in Holland when they have done underground a metro system in Amsterdam where the city is already 15 feet below sea level? How come in 1954 we built a tunnel underneath the bay and then underneath the river? Because we can create tunnels with those boring machines, okay? And then placed in metal tubes, totally sealed against floods. What we have to do, of course, is try to minimize the use of all those expensive solutions and do it in terrain that is higher. If I compare it to Madrid, and why do I refer to Madrid? Because Madrid was my 1949 7-year-old experience of something that I thought was wonderful. Okay, how I could travel underground, and it was so fast with my grandmother, going everywhere, mostly in the cemetery, of course. But you have to see that it can be done. I mean, it can be done. When I see Panama City and Santo Domingo in San Juan do it, come on, all right? Now, I see, for example, a lot of excuses being given in Miami. Well, most of it because the mayor doesn't like it. But, if you only build one line and are stuck with one line for 20 years, you're not telling the people of Miami there's any future in improving this or making it better or making it bigger. Transit systems can hold a city back if they're not developed or improved. It's as simple as that. We in New York have suffered. And the proof of the pudding is in Washington, D.C. Look how far Washington has come since they built their metro. It has grown by leaps and bounds. It is incredible. It is fascinating, especially for us. We're very much against transit, okay? Especially underground subway systems. But even Los Angeles has, and so does Atlanta. So, it can be done, Mary. I think that, there are situations that are costlier than others. True. The deeper you go with a line, the more costly it is. The bigger the stations are, the more costly it is. So you have to plan and study all options to come to a very important middle ground of which you can afford. And start small, but start, grow. As my first scheme was very, how would I say, unscary. It can show how we can build it with the first 2.5 kilometers that I know we can build, okay? I know we can build. I know we can start to build. And the people have to feel good about it. I mean, I have a lot of people in my blog who love to see a metro in Havana. And it's growing. And it will serve everybody well. Like all the other 200 plus cities in the world that cannot go back. Okay, have I answered it?
Yes, we have 3 more questions related to each other and to what you have already discussed, so you can elaborate further. The first is from Marcelino Rodriguez. What is the methodology to apply to justify the economic need for the subway project? How can operations research and graph theory be used to formulate the Havana subway project? That's the first. The next is from my colleague from La Guardia, Ernesto Menendez Conde, who says he has been listening about this metro idea since the 1970s. And Ernesto wants to know, how doable is this project now? How long do you think it would take? And finally, from Carlos Riobó, the director of our Latin American and Iberian cultures and PhD program at the Graduate Center, what is the bedrock of Havana made of? Manhattan has the very hard mica schist. And
granite.
Yes, yes, the metro was created there using cut and cover. So you see, they are all very organically related.
Well, the economic question is a very difficult one to answer because I cannot get into somebody else's pocket at this moment and determine how much we can spend, how much we can have. But the idea is that we need to understand that a city without proper transportation suffers greatly, okay? It doesn't grow. And if it doesn't grow, and if the people are becoming less productive, we lose a long, very unincalculable amount, okay? And this is often forgotten. People worry about the cost of building the thing, but don't worry about how much is it costed in human cost of not having it in the first place, okay? If it had cost so much, Santo Domingo will not be building a third line, okay? And that's a very important thing. In a place like Miami, however, where everybody drives, because the government says you have to drive to go everywhere, hey, that's different. Well, Santo Domingo is a city not too different from Havana. It's even less dense than Havana. So if anything, it's more of a reason to have it in Havana than there. Havana is more like Madrid, okay? So the economic reason is very simple. And that is that without it, New York cannot live. Right now, even Los Angeles cannot live, okay? And certainly I can cite all the great cities of Europe, even Moscow would not survive without a system, okay? But let me compare something. And it has to do with the structure. There is no doubt that some terrains are more difficult than others, okay? And I oftentimes laugh. And I remember having spoken to a contractor in Madrid where they were saying about what happens in Madrid. Well, we can't build high rises because if we do, our underlying clay forces us to create huge, wide footings, okay? Well, but when you're building metros, it's like cutting cheese. It really is very simple. So Madrid just happily just keeps boring and boring and creating tunnels. I mean, right now, Madrid has more stations than New York, okay? And it's a city less than half the size. So now, who's better than? Oh, definitely China. Shanghai and Beijing. And now they're all of those cities in China are building subway systems. I can't keep up with what they're doing, okay? But on the other end, of course, you have New York. With the schist and the Manhattan schist and granite, it's a hell to build. But guess what? So there's that little thin building going up on 57th Street at 111, West 57th Street. Well, they wanted to build it. It's going to make a lot of money. So why not spend it? Even cut the hell out of all that granite, you know? So it's done, you know? Let's not forget that. There's always a pro and con on everything. But here, my main reason here is because we love this city. We want to see it better. We want to get it better. I'm not saying we're going to do this tomorrow, but I do have to be encouraging to everybody to be positive about it. Now, what was the last question? I'm sorry.
Well, there's how long do you think it would take to build it?
Well, yeah. Well, actually, it's very funny because I saw an article in the LA Times published in February of 1985 that grandma had just said that they were going to build this system, and it was going to take this three-line system that I showed you before, and it was going to take 8 years. You know, and I'm quoting people there with the know-how there of what they can and cannot do. So I would say, why not? I think that my proposals, for example, to build that little 2.5 kilometer line just to prove a point, just to get us from Central Rampa at 23rd Street to be able to get to the airport in a hurry, what would that cost? $200 million? But if it proves that it works, then it can encourage the city folks, the government, to continue, okay? And that is what's important, because that is what has happened to every city in the world I know. Once they have seen, and in 1949, Madrid had only 59 stations. Why is it that it now has 350? That's very important to know. And it's because it grows. The city grows and benefits from that. The beneficial increments are enormous. Okay.
And Marcelino Rodriguez replies to your reply. And then he says that it is a very general answer that no one disputes the need for a rapid transit system. But how do you decide between one variant of the project over the other?
Well, obviously, I think that, you know, with open doors, all the people involved have to openly discuss and study all the options, okay? I have only spent times to discuss, to look at 2 options as startups today. You know, how can we get to something that's a reasonable, simpler, cheaper solution to start? You can start with one line, okay? And not do what Miami did and stop, okay? We have to continue. And we have to continue like all the other cities. I mean, we're having cities in Latin America that are quickly adding out the numbers of cities that are building metros, and you know, with all kinds of problems, you know. So how would I say? It's a system that is so important to move people quickly, to save them time and energy, to make it more productive. I mean, just imagine shutting down the subway system in New York for a week. Think of it. You can't. It'd be impossible. You would kill the city. So to have it, it's a necessity.
Yes, we have another question from Carlos Riobo. The tunnel under Havana Harbor was built, oh, wait, I lost. Was built by the French 70 years plus ago. Perhaps an international collaboration now could mitigate costs and procedures, etc.
Well, yes, I have a point of view of that, and that is that, you know, one of the great temptations that I have even discussed with people in Havana, confidentially, is that I have Dragados de España merely 20 blocks from my office. They just finished building a ton of tunnels here in New York City. They're one of the 5 different companies that are building to beat the band in Madrid. In fact, they're the ones building in Riyadh. They're building a subway system in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So they're experts. Experts are not saying, oh, how much it costs. Because in New York, we're very depressing. When it comes to discussing anything about improving the system in New York, we're still crying for the 60-year-old Second Avenue subway line that's going to be built, completed after I pass away. It's that simple. We can't have that attitude. We have to be more positive, and we have to study and look at what we can do. All right. When you look at that, you know, I go back to Milan, and I said, boy, they just cut the damn thing, put a little roof in, and off go the trains. And that's how they did it. You should see the extent of the lines. Now, the reason is that Rome doesn't have that. Oh, well, we have all those wonderful things from Roman times that we have to save, and everything slows everything down. You know, I think that the end product is what's important here. You got to do it. You can't get Rome and put it in second place to Milan. All right.
Yes, we have, again, we never addressed Carlos Riobau's question of what is the bedrock, actually, the bedrock in Havana, what is it, what kind of rock is it? Then also we have, again, Marcelino Rodriguez says, how do we quantify the benefits and costs of the different variants? And then Miriam and Sarah says that hers was just a comment, but I do have one question to make it three, Dino, which is, again, we had a network of trams. And I remember fondly when I was a child, because there was a line of trams. I am afraid I'm betraying my age by saying that, but I remember the one on Calle 17. I remember it fondly as a child taking it. Couldn't you, there are cities like Berlin who have subway, buses, and trams.
Yes.
Couldn't we have kept some of those trams and sort of by having a combined series, sort of both solve the congestion issue, but also, yes. So
generally,
please
yes, I'll answer
Carlos
your
first. Take Carlos first, because I don't want to abuse my privilege as mother.
No, but I will answer yours quickly, because in reality, yes, you know, had the situation in 1952 not become so dire in Havana, where in essence the way that we conducted the city, I mean, the idea of having 4 rush hours in Havana was really something that you don't do anywhere else. That's a big burden to move the same number of people 4 times a day instead of twice. The cost is double. I mean, it's that simple. And the cost on getting around the city is double, is worse, made worse. Yes, we should have saved them. We should have saved some of them. But at the same time, they had to have started an underground system to relieve the ground areas, okay? Because what happened was that by taking all the trams out and then they threw it in the buses, guess what? We still had the same line of buses all the way down Reina and all the way down Neptuno in 1958, So what did we do? Well, we modernized it a little bit, but we didn't really improve it. We should have graduated to the next level and at least taken some of the load from the very small, narrow streets of Havana and put them on the ground. And I'm only talking about Centro Havana and all Havana. I'm not talking about the rest. If that alone had happened, then like Madrid, like New York, the center of the city would have the doability of having people, move around on the top as well as on the bottom, okay? But now let me go back to the first question, please.
The bedrock, what is the bedrock?
Yes, I mean, thinking of Manhattan schist and granite here in New York, which is the worst of all the ones I do know, and going to the simplest one that I do know right now is Madrid clay. Havana is a calcareous rock, that is not that hard. It's not schist. It's not granite. And in fact, from the photographs of the tunnel that you can see, it almost looks like you could just go there and cut them down. All right. So to exaggerate that as being a great difficulty is going too far. Okay. There has to be a willingness, okay, to get it done. All right. Now, insofar as also then with the water issue that Mary brought, yes, for example, one of the options that I have is not to go through the line at Cuatro Caminos because Cuatro Caminos floods constantly. It's too low. So I would not put the line to there. And that's why I would niche the Mangrana line and not put it there. Yusanga is the best option anyhow. And that's the kind of decision making that has to take place there. Okay. They wanted me to help them, and I did my best in those 2 years in 96 and 98. And even in 2002 to push a final vision. Okay. I'm willing to help. I would love to do that. okay? And I think we should do that. Your second question was what?
This, you are carrying out a qualitative analysis. How do we quantify the benefits and costs of the different variants?
Well, we can by sitting and studying very hard and spending a lot of time. There's no doubt. I mean, I know that the group in Havana already did that. I am sure it just wasn't published. So we cannot benefit today from saying, here it is. It's been done already, okay? But again, if you just cut and fill close to the surface, it's cheap. If you want to go down 80 feet, that's a whole other story, all right? And that's very expensive. You know, if you want to do it all on the ground, that's more expensive than if you do part above ground, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can, you know, the range is enormous, okay? And for example, San Juan is all above ground. They built it in no time. It was very simple. But, you know, I don't recommend it. It also doesn't go to Old San Juan because it would have been very damaging to have this area line entering Old San Juan. Nor would I recommend it in Centro Havana or Havana Vieja, okay? I would like to see them there on the ground for sure, to relieve the streets, if anything. And it was a third question.
There was a comment from Maria Mansara.
Yes.
She says, I love your economic cost and benefit reasoning. It's very compelling. Once Cuba can get tourism up and running again, why not earmark some of that money from tourism for subway or light rail, my preference, construction? Surely it would enhance tourism a lot, both tourists being able to get around, but also tourist workers.
Definitely, Mary. I'm all with you. They should hire you to give them those ideas, for sure. You know, and that's my point. Not only that, I think that, you know, the people in the city, and you have seen them go through periods of where they've waited hours for buses at times. When the bus came, it was so filled, you know, and there's 50 people waiting. That's very sad to see. That people get discouraged. You know, they're only human beings, you know. And one of the problems, in fact, that we have to and always forget in many of these problems worldwide is that people don't consider climate, okay? One of the reasons that we were given, in fact, people saw this in Europe, the plan of 1990. I said, the stations are too far apart. And the answer came that, well, then we have buses to move them. Well, whenever you create a two-fare zone in the center of a city, you're making huge risks. You know, that could maybe happen in peripheral areas because of cost. But when it comes to the center of a city, you can't. What, for example, people love the New York subway system, but I can say to them, you know what? The New York subway system was built by private enterprise. Private companies decided, the BMT, the IND, the IRT, they were going to do their own lines. And guess where they all wanted to do their lines? One on top of the other. They wanted us right smack through the center of the city. So what did they do? They did Lexington Avenue, the 3rd Avenue, 2nd Avenue, you know, East Avenue, that's the 9th Avenue as far west as. We killed that 9th, we killed 2nd, we killed 3rd. And what are we left with? You know, 8th Avenue to Lexington. How about the walk to the extreme east and west of Manhattan? That's a hell of a walk. And now the new 2nd Avenue line, oh, the stations cost too much, I hear. Sure, and guess where they're putting them? One on 72nd Street and the next one on 96? Really? You know, if you look at the old IRT on 7th Avenue, I have a station on 14th Street, another one on 18th Street, another one on 23rd Street, 28th Street, 34th Street. You know, walking distance. People have to remember that. And in the case of a climate like Havana, that's very important. You can't ask people to wait on buses for a long time under the sun, or to walk a hell of a lot from one station to wherever they're going. They have to be close enough to satisfy walking distance without having to reach for a secondary transportation system. at least in the center of the city. And in the case of Havana, I even have to include now El Vedado, because the densities in El Vedado are such that I have to consider it almost like the center of the city. Okay? And yes, Mary, you're right. That's how we should do it. And that's how they should do it. And we should help them. We should encourage them to do that. Yes. Put some money aside, because that's an important improvement. You know, one of the things that I have heard in our country, in the United States, is that subway systems should pay for themselves. Really? Like schools? Should schools be profitable? You know, we're losing wonderful hospitals because we force them to pay for themselves. And if they're not making a lot of money, there's an awful lot of hospitals. We just lost St. Vincent's here in my area because it was helping the elderly and the homeless with free service. Really? We're willing to lose a great institution like that because we're not willing to help them in the funding? You know, no city in the world has their transit systems private where they have to be profitable. Certainly not in Europe. I don't know enough in China, but I can say, hey, the government built it, the government runs it, and whether it's a deficit or not, they don't really care. Now, the truth of the matter is that in Havana, the interurban line system that is working and is functioning, bad as they criticize it is, because it does need repair, the cost to the users is very, very low, okay? So, you know, at least there's an attempt to make things better.
So I'm just wanted to underscore Carlos Riobó's comment that many colonial buildings in Havana were made also from piedras calizas. So it gives them that it is soft enough to do beautiful carvings on it.
Carve
also
in Baroque style, yes.
Right, yes. It also makes them vulnerable to acid rain, but fortunately we don't have, they don't have that problem in Havana, but it's that beauty of that light color of buildings, the colonial building made with piedras calizas is quite beautiful.
Sure, but let's take it a little bit at a time. All the interurban lines are existing, first of all, and they're all above ground. We're keeping them. We're just improving them. We're making sure we have double lines, and we're refurbishing the stations and building some new ones. So that's an easy fix, okay? And not that costly, and it can be done. You know, I know that there's a lot of people unemployed in Havana that can surely use a job and become more productive, okay? And this is a place where construction workers can come in and help. Now, when you get into the metro, let's go slowly. Let's build it slowly. 2.5 kilometers here, 3.5 later, and see how well it works. I can assure you that Havana will benefit greatly.
So we have time for a couple of more questions. Anybody? We have a comment from Silvia Pedraza. It's a comment. She thanks you for a very good presentation, and she says we all hope for a better future for Cuba, and this would be part of it.
Thank you. Indeed.
Transportation. Yes.
Indeed.
Any other comments or questions for Dino? Nadie? No, I'll ask again if nobody has, Dino. Again, again about the 1921 plan that you said was approved and it was studied and approved still by the government of Menocal, which ended in 21. And then the next one was Alfredo Sayas. Why do you think, if it had been approved? Because it wasn't yet Machado and it was not yet the depression of 1921, of 1929. So why do you think in 1921, the project didn't go forward?
It's very unfortunate because the scheme was so well thought out, eliminating For example, construction through the heavily used calzadas in Jesus del Monte. They put him 2 blocks further west. It eliminated going through Linea because of the potential of flooding, and decided to go through the middle of Verado on 17th Street, safe from flooding and safe from creating traffic problems. So it was so well thought out, and yet it covered the old city well, because that simple loop of Neptuno, down Central Park, down to Fraternidad, and down the Monte really covers Centro Havana and the old city. So it was a shame that it wasn't built, but I can only assume we don't have the most honorable republic in history in the world to ensure that we get everything built, unfortunately. And this was one of the most tragic losses we had. But I also see that by the time they got to drawing, the engineering, and all of the stuff that takes quite a few years to develop, to draw up, and then to go to bed, all right? If the depression just began to set in bad enough, that may have been the main cause. It could have been political reason too. You know, I don't want him to think about it. I want me to think about it. You know, that kind of stuff, all right? And it was a shame. I wish it had been done. It would have saved us a hell of a lot of problems.
Absolutely. So last chance for your comments or questions for Dino Fernández.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it. The fact is that we had a lot of people helping through over the years to put a lot of effort to try to get this thing from coming to fruition. So far, we have made attempts. I mean, we certainly have tried, but yet we have failed. And I really would like to see that we keep continuing to try. And this lecture is one more try. You know, why give up? You know, I'm not willing to surrender yet. I think it should be done. And I think that if it's concerned for making the launch, and I know most places in the world, you know, don't dare take you know, the plunge. Start small, start little, prove it. You have already 23rd Street already with a tunnel that's almost 3 kilometers long. Finish it. Put a line there. Tie it to the new extension from Tulipan. See what happens. I'd love to see that happen. I'll go there myself.
We all do, Dino. So all that remains is to thank you for your wonderful presentation. Bravissimo, bravissimo.
Thank you for the opportunity.